Have you ever heard of the five love languages? I've heard of it, but I've never really gone really deep into it. But Karen is a Karen coach and a human behavior specialist. She's going to map out what this can do, not only understanding yourself, but understanding the other person, getting your needs met, meeting their needs, speaking the same language. This is so interesting. So definitely join us here. My name is Dale Ecuyer, and I help families find holistic solutions to bring health and harmony into the home. That's what we do, right, Karen? We're trying to
That's
bring
what we do.
all the tools that we have, and you're a master at this. So tell us about the love languages and why it's so important, but more importantly, how do you identify it?
Yes. So, next to understanding personalities, which is, of course, the cornerstone of the parenting blueprint that I work with, and the internal emotional needs of each of the personality styles, the understanding of the five love language is the other toolkit that you need to have in order to really connect with your kids. You know, we say we love our kids, but do they feel loved? It doesn't matter if you say, I love you, if deep down inside the child isn't feeling loved. And so there are five different love languages, and let me go through them with you. The first one is physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of service. So that's all five of the love languages. So let me briefly give you a description of what each one of these love languages is and how it communicates. So physical touch is probably pretty easy. It's usually the hug, it's usually the touch on the hand, it's usually the kids who like the snuggle, that is having that physical touch. And you can pretty much sense a child who likes physical touch because they always want to snuggle or they want to cuddle and even as my kids got older, my son Eric, when he wasn't feeling well, he just wanted to lay in his lap and so I can, stroke his hair, you know what I mean? And he'd fall asleep in my lap. I mean, he was a physical touch kid, but you can pretty much tell the kids who are physical touch because they'll come to you and they're giving you a hug because that's their love language. They're speaking their love language. Then we have the words of affirmation. So words of affirmation is really just affirming people. I actually did a whole unit on this, on how different personalities hear different words of affirmation, how we can affirm them on specifically who they are, words of affirmation. And that was probably one of the more difficult languages, believe it or not, for me to speak, because as a dominant personality, I had expectations. People just needed to do what they needed to do. And I wasn't really good at affirming them when they did it and understanding how important that was, words of affirmation, that I love you and I appreciate you and you did a great job. And, I love the way you're good with your friends, or I love the way that you always, concentrate and do such a good job, just being specific on words of affirmation. That was not always an easy love language for me to speak. It just really, really wasn't. I'd had an expectation, so I wasn't always giving those words of affirmation. And kids need to, I think all kids need to hear all five of these love languages, all five of them. And just like with personalities, they're going to connect with a couple more than others, are going to be more predominant. Okay. So for instance, words of affirmation are very important to everybody, but how it's received could be differently. Now, let me give you an example, a quick example of this one. My son, Kyle, I tell my kids all the time when I would drop them off to school, hey, I love you, make it a good day. And I remember when Kyle got out of the car and I said, I love you, make it a good day. He looked at me, said, you ought to love me. I'm your kid. And I was like, and he slams the door. And I was like, well, that didn't go over so well, because you know what? It didn't penetrate him. It didn't penetrate him. It was like, whatever, because that's not his love language. That's not his love language. But if I were to say it to the other kids, I love you too, Mom. Do you see the difference? So when you're practicing and learning this about your kids, you'll see how they receive the love, right? The next one is quality time. This is a big one for me. This is probably my number one. As a dominant personality who likes to do things, okay, that is pretty obvious why that would be one of my top priority of my love languages. Quality time and doing things together. So maybe it's taking a walk, maybe it's cooking together, maybe it's going out and shooting hoops in the driveway. And can I tell you, when you spend quality time with your kids, this is when they start to open up. They start to open up. I know when we're busy moms and I've got this to do and this to do and this to do, we are not paying attention to the quality time that our kids really need. So consider, am I spending time or am I spending quality time? There is a difference, right? Just being there together is one thing, but really interacting, having good communication, eye contact, spending that quality time. The next one is gifts. Now, gifts. Now, the gifts don't have to be big, elaborate gifts. I mean, seriously, I could like have a bag of M&Ms when I picked up my daughter from school, and I was the best mom in the world. You know what I mean? Because I know how much she loves chocolate, and I'm taking her to dance, and here's a bag of M&Ms before class, and it was that, or we're doing drive-through Starbucks, on the way. I mean, just those little gifts, doesn't have to be big, elaborate gifts. But the one thing to be careful with gifts is that gifts is not replacing the other love languages. Okay. Sometimes parents feel as though I will buy them and give them. And that's one thing if that's their love language. If it's not, it's just a substitute and it's not really communicating true love to the heart of the child. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then the last one we'll talk about is acts of service, doing things for each other out of love. Okay. And again, there's that fine line that now I do acts of service because I'm a doer, right? I'm a dominant doer. I get things done. And so I find that I did acts of service because that's just what I did. That was speaking my love language. But I also recognized that I appreciated acts of service. I'll give you a personal example. Like my husband cleans our cars. Like, you know what a gift it is when I get in my car and it's clean and it's vacuum and I'm like, oh my gosh, he cleaned my car. Like, I'm like, he loves me. He takes care of me. You know what I mean? He cleaned my car. Now that may sound silly to somebody, but to me, it's like a big deal, that's an act of service. So I just briefly went over what those 5 love languages are. So let me tell you, how do you identify the 5 love languages? And I know, Dale, you're going to provide a link for people to take the assessment for the 5 love languages. But let me give an example of parents of how they can try to identify love languages in their kids, just through observation. The first thing is see how they're loving you. Are they hugging you? Are they saying kind things to you? Are they wanting your time? Sometimes kids are crying out for quality time is you never spend any time with me. And this gets to be hard when you have a family that maybe has a new baby come into the house. And then that first child is feeling neglected. And it's like, you never spend any time with me. And then we get behavior issues because we're not balancing that. You never spend time with me. They will tell you that quality time. So watch how they're loving you. Are they bringing you the little rock from the garden? Are they bringing you the flower? Are they giving you the gifts, right? Are they wanting to do things for you? Watch how they're loving you. That will speak volumes as to what their love language is, because the easiest language to speak is our own, right? The easiest language to speak is our own. The next thing, and I've actually talked about this in some of my training, is ask them, how do you know I love you? How do you know I love you? So when I ask my kids that, how do you know I love you? Kyle says, you make my lunch. And I'm thinking, really? I make everybody's lunch. But that's an act of service, right? That's an act of service. So I'd ask one of the other kids, how do you know I love you? You tell me. Words of affirmation. How do you know I love you? You hug me. Physical touch. So if you ask them, how do you know I love you? You will probably start to hear some of this. Let me give you another example. I had gone on a trip. I was doing a training, and this was a cool gig. I actually did a training on a cruise ship. It was a retreat, right? So I got to go on the cruise, and I did, like 4 hours of training and got to do the cruise. But anyway, while I was away, I brought my kids some gifts. So I was in Mexico. I brought Anna this really beautiful festive dress. I bought Eric a rain stick. And I bought Kyle one of those stone chess sets, right? Because he loves strategy. So I brought the gifts home. I gave all the kids the gifts. I mean, Anna was in the dress and dancing all around in it. Every day after school, she came home, put the dress on, dance in the dress. Eric slept with the rain stick. The rain stick went in the car when we went to school, had to stay in the car, but loved the gifts. And Kyle never opened the box. He looked at it and put it away. And I said, did you not like the gift? Do you not like the gift? He's like, it's all right. Do you want to play? And I never had time, Dale. I didn't make time to play him. And then then he was like, you never play with me. Why don't you play a game with me? And because I didn't want to sit down and take the time. Now I'm being transparent, that how I was as an early mom, to take the time to play this game. Was I not hearing what he was saying? And then finally I was like, fine, let's play. He set the chessboard up and he checkmated me in like 3 freaking moves, right? It was like a 30-second game. It was over, right? Now in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I knew he was going to checkmate me in 3 moves, I'd have done this sooner. But the thing was, he wanted the time. It wasn't the gift. It was the time. So for Kyle, I could identify it was acts of service, you make my lunch, and quality time, right?
So interesting.
And so for the other kids, it was the physical touch or the words of affirmation. And so identify that, because if we are speaking a language that doesn't commute to them, they are not feeling love. It's one thing to say, I love you, but if the person doesn't feel loved by you, it don't matter.
Wow.
We've still misconnected. Now, the other thing I was able to identify with was different personalities can connect with different love languages based on their internal emotional needs, right? Now, Kyle is very task driven. He's that dominant, cautious style blend. So, of course, acts of service would be a predominant style of love language because he's task driven, and quality time. My other kids who are more relational, of course, it was words, it was touch. And so can you see the power in this of the personalities and the love languages, and then learning how to speak it? Now, learning how to speak a different love language than what your love language is can be a little challenging, right?
Right.
Because I don't know what that looks like, right? It's like you go to another country and I speak English and I go to Italy, but I don't speak Italian. So I'm trying to communicate with someone who speaks Italian. But what am I doing? I'm speaking louder and slower English. Okay? They still don't understand me. I needed to learn the language so that I could connect and that they feel loved. No, they know I love them. But do they truly feel loved? That's the power in this. Seriously, I've got books. There's the 5 love languages. There's 5 love languages for children, 5 love languages for teenagers, because as your teens grow into those years of when they're starting to separate from us, we still want them to feel loved, but it needs to be in a little different way. Okay. It needs to be in a little different way. This information is powerful. So between this love languages and understanding personalities and internal emotional needs, I'm telling you, these are all the tools in the toolkit that a parent needs to be able to develop the relationships that will last a lifetime.
That is it. That's it right there in a nutshell. So let's just go off a little bit on a tangent, because understanding your own love language,
Yeah.
how important that is, and
Yes.
knowing that just because you may have a certain love language, you have to understand that that may not be. And like you said, it's harder to understand another one's love language if it's
Sure.
not the same as yours.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit, how important it is to recognize your own first, identify your own, identify theirs, and then you can make the connection and understanding the personality types, which is your expertise as well.
Yes. It's so easy to speak your love language because that's what you do. That's what you know. That's your comfort zone. Just like your personality style, the way you interact and communicate, that's your natural style. That's how God wired you. It's very easy to do it that way. And then you're with somebody else who doesn't speak your language and you're feeling like, what's going on here? So what are we doing? We're speaking it louder, longer, and harder. And I can just recognize that how I feel loved when someone does something for me. Like I said, when Mark cleans the car, you know what I mean? Like I feel good. My biggest thing, like when holidays come or my birthday comes, like I am not big on gifts personally. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reject the gift. Don't get me wrong. But you know what I want? I want to go somewhere, do something, and make a memory. I mean, I think one year we all got theater tickets to go see the Jersey Boys, and we had lunch and went to see the Jersey Boys. I mean, that's like a monumental occasion for me. Why? Because I'm a quality time person. I want to spend that time together and interacting and making a memory. That's what speaks to me. Now, is it my language for all my kids? No, I shared with you, what some of their different love languages were. We all had a blast because we all love the theater, but it's just, how do you adapt? How do you adapt? And like I said, two different ways. Observe how they're loving you and ask, how do you know I love you? And in your marriage relationship, and this is something that's key as well, is just, how many marriages are we in which we are not feeling loved? We know we're in this committed marriage. I mean, I know I had challenges. I'm a blended family. I think my first marriage failed because we didn't communicate our love languages. We didn't know this information to know what it was. And then you're feeling very lonely and isolated and unloved. You may say you love me, but if I don't feel loved, they're just words.
Wow. That's powerful. I mean, this information could transform marriages, child-parent relations. I mean, it's so powerful. Let
Yeah.
me just go back to one more thing because this is so, so good. But I keep thinking about, I'm picturing you when you talked about saying goodbye to your kids in the car, okay? And the one kid that said, "Of course you love me," or
Right.
whatever, like Kyle,
Right.
right?
You ought to. I am your kid. I was like, okay.
What would you say, like, instead? What other words could you use that would land on him differently?
So for Kyle being very task driven, I had to use words of what I affirmed about his task, the things that he did. I like the fact that you think things through. I like the fact that you always like to do things right, because we need to speak all five of these love languages to our kids. We all need to feel all of these, the acts of service, the gifts. I mean, we need to speak all of them, but there are going to be probably two predominant love languages that are going to connect with them the most. And so obviously words of affirmation weren't a big deal to him. When I say, I love you, have a great day, or make it a great day, that didn't penetrate, where the other words were like, love you too, mom. And they're all happy and joyful as they skip on off to school. And Kyle's like slamming a door. And I was like, yep, they come out of the same house and the same gene pool, but it's just how it's received. But for Kyle, let me give you another instance. At one point, he had asked me for duct tape. He's like, do we have any duct tape? And I'm like, I don't know, probably. Why? Why? What do you want duct tape for? He said, so I can duct tape you to a chair to watch this movie with me.
Oh my Lord. Boy, he was really shouting there.
Quality time, right? Quality time. Because I would start and then I'd leave. Moms, we're busy. I'm going to change the loads of wash and get ready for dinner. I'm going to check on the other kids, right? And that was him crying out too. He didn't say spend time with me. He asked me for duct tape so he could tape me to the chair. I mean, like, you'll start to look back and see these, what I call the cues, right? You know what I mean? There were cues here all along of how they want. I could walk into school and Eric would come running down the hallway and give me a big old hug. This was in middle school. He would still give me a hug. Kyle walks up to me and says, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, you're not the only kid that's in this school, right? I could be volunteering for something, but I mean, the difference is Kyle was never a snuggly kid. It's still hugging a board. And I know it's probably uncomfortable for him. He's very task driven in his personality, where Eric's much more relational. Eric and Anna are much more relational. It's not right or wrong. It's just a different language. But if you want to have that connection where your kids feel valued and understood by you, we need to speak their language.
Oh, that's perfect. That is so brilliant. This is so good, Karen. I love it. I have that book and I think I picked it up, but I'm going to pick it up again.
It's powerful. Yeah.
It's powerful. Unbelievable.
It's powerful for in every stage of your life. I think it's powerful for our kids to understand their love language when they're new in their relationships and just getting married. I think it's powerful for the parents to understand the kids, you know what I mean? How my kids feel loved. Between the personalities and the love languages, I coach with all of this knowledge and information because it really is to get to the heart of the child. And then as our relationships change, the teenagers, okay, in those years that start to get a little volatile, we're not quite sure how to adapt. There's again some great strategies that I coach with on how your kids can still feel loved by you, even though they're starting to separate from us a little bit.
Right. Wow. So good. Wow. All right. So we're going to drop some links in the comments here. If you found this valuable, please share it with a friend. Like, this is gold. This is pure gold. This is like healing relationships, giving you the exact tools and strategies and awareness that you need to facilitate change and to make things right.